Hi everyone, it's Kristan Hawkins. Welcome to this episode of Explicitly Pro-Life. And today I have a very special guest, one of my heroes, Father Frank Pavone, the Priest for Life.
Hi Kristan, good to be with you.
Yeah, so we are actually in California today together. And I kind of grabbed you because I wanted to have a conversation with you that I think everyone else should hear. And this is something we were together at a campaign headquarters not long ago.
That was exciting.
That was. In my personal capacity, you may all know this, I'm on the advisory board, the ProLife Advisory Board for President Trump's re-election campaign, and Father Frank is the co-chair of that board, along with Marjorie Dana-Felser, the president of Susan B. Anthony List. So we were at the campaign headquarters and got kind of like an update about what's going on. But I was kind of talking to Father Frank about some common questions I get from pro-life students and young people about supporting President Trump, supporting other candidates, not just like one candidate, Republicans or candidates we may not personally always agree with. I get the same question from supporters who have children who are pro-life, but then like, I'll never vote for this candidate who happens to be the pro-life candidate. And how do you, talk to those people and how do we talk about and think about who we're voting for? And I think there's a lot of conflict because there's so many important issues for us to consider when we are going to the ballot box.
Yes.
But you're kind of the expert. You are like the pro-life vote priest.
And these are questions that I get as well all the time. And let's frame it this way to start. No election is just about a particular candidate. We're never just voting for a man or a woman. We are voting for an entire worldview. The particular man or woman running for that particular office is just the messenger. It's not about them. It's about the direction the country is going to take if they are in power. An election is a transfer of power. A vote is a transfer of power. They're working for us, right? They're representing us. And they're passing laws and enforcing them and initiating policies and making judgments that are going to affect our lives and the lives of our children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren. So people should not be distracted either positively or negatively by whether they like the candidate or not, or even whether they're morally concerned about the candidate's behavior, past, present, or future. This is not the main thing. The choice we face in this election is a choice between two worldviews that are more divergent than ever before. It's a choice between the culture of life and the culture of death. It's a choice between American patriotism or globalism. It's a choice between poverty and prosperity. It's a choice between being guided by the Constitution or being guided by a corrupt culture. I mean, these are big, big choices. And so President Trump is just the messenger. We vote for him. We bring in an entire administration, an entire cabinet, thousands of positions in the executive branch. We bring in people like Mike Pence. We bring in people like Ben Carson. It all comes as a package. We bring in an entire party. And this is not just about the presidential race. If people are looking, for example, at who they're voting for their representative in the House of Representatives, any one particular race could decide the balance of power in Congress. And you think about it, okay, so my vote, does it matter so much that I like candidate A or B? Or is it a question of, does the party that they belong to belong in power? Because then they're going to control all the committees. Then they're going to decide what bills even get to the floor for a debate, much less get passed. I mean, this is big, way bigger than anything any of us think about the man or the woman themselves.
Yeah, I mean, okay, you brought up more questions for me. So what about, how do you answer, and I've heard this a lot in the pro-life movement of, well, we don't want to make abortion illegal, we just want to make it unthinkable. And I'm always like, well, it's and or, like, until you make it illegal, some people who derive their morality from legality, which they should not do, are always going to think it's legal because, okay, because the government says it's okay. So you have to make it illegal. And we also do want to make it unthinkable. But like, I've heard this argument of, well, we just need to focus on making it unthinkable. We need to focus on changing minds. We need to focus on serving women. And we just need to stay the heck out of politics. So we don't need to vote or, who cares who I vote for because they're all corrupt in Washington, D.C. They're Republicans, when they were in power, failed to defund Planned Parenthood, which I criticized them for. Yeah. Like, how do you answer that when someone's like, well, I'm just going to stay out. I'm just going to boycott the whole process because the whole process is corrupt.
We have to be careful not to make excuses. We have to, it can't be unthinkable unless first it's illegal. Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't be unthinkable if it were legal, because then what that means is that people who are making the laws think it's okay. Therefore, it's not unthinkable. So, yes, of course we want to make it unthinkable. That's our ultimate goal. Of course we want to change minds and hearts. That's part of our daily work. But changed minds and hearts lead to changed laws and policies. If your heart and mind has been changed about abortion, changed in the direction of realizing this is killing, this is murder, morally speaking, well, then how can you vote for somebody that thinks it should continue? Changed hearts and minds mean changed laws and changed elections and changed votes. Now, to separate it, to put it off to the side, this political fray, might be very tempting for some people. It might seem very attractive. But if we said, let's try that, I'm going to put aside my involvement in politics, well, did you put aside the way the laws are going to affect you? You can't put that aside. I mean, somebody's going to pass some laws, and they're going to affect you one way or the other, and they're going to affect your children and your grandchildren. You can't exempt yourself from that because we're living as citizens of this country. The laws affect us. Are the court decisions going to affect us? Yeah, they're going to affect us. So the question is not, can I put this activity aside or not? The question is, am I going to exercise my responsibility to make sure that I can influence how these laws, these court decisions, these policies are going to affect me, my neighbor? It's part of love of neighbor when you think about it. If I care about the person next to me or the person down the street, well, then one of the ways for me caring about them is to elect people who are going to make laws and make decisions that affect them in the right way, that protect their rights rather than destroy their rights. So in short, there is no such thing as subtracting ourselves from this process without subtracting ourselves from the responsibility we have to ourselves, our neighbors, our families, our future, because that's what these elections impact.
How do you handle, so there was a pro-life activist, he goes by Reverend. He was, I think he was involved in Operation Rescue in the olden days of the pro-life movement, the early 90s, and he recently came out basically saying he's not pro-life anymore.
Yeah, it's very sad.
It's very sad. And I've read a lot of what he's said, and a lot of the language that this person has said is while I still acknowledge that the child in the womb is a human being and deserves the right to live, I've come to kind of basically repent for ever voting for conservative causes or Republican causes, because those are the policies that don't help. And it's really morally, I think it's very interesting how he's arrived at this position of if it is killing, how can you vote for someone who's actively supporting that killing? And what's the moral?
It's incoherent, isn't it? And
it's the principle of non-contradiction, right? Like it can't be and not be at the same time.
Well, and thank God it's the exception rather than the rule, as you and I know. The flow of conversions is in our direction.
That's what makes me so nervous about it, because I'm like, I don't ever see, like when we have a student who becomes a sold out pro-life student leader.
Yeah.
I have never seen someone go regress.
There's no turning back. No, that's right.
And so it makes you question, why is he doing? What's the motivation? Is there some other motivation behind doing it? But that's why I've read so much about it. But what the arguments he's using in some of these pieces are very similar to what I hear from people saying, well, I'm a pro-life Democrat, or I'm a pro-life liberal, or whatever. I qualify the word pro-life with feminist or whatever.
Yes.
And then somehow, because they've added this other adjective after the word pro-life, that justifies them not being engaged in politics or voting pro-life first.
It's dangerous to disconnect the issues entirely. We know that, we are single issue in the sense that we know not only that abortion is the most important issue, but that the right to life is the heart and core and soul of every issue. It's what makes an issue an issue. Why is any issue an issue in the first place? Well, because it impacts human life. And
that's a hierarchy of rights, right?
Yeah,
life,
it's a hierarchy.
Liberty, property.
Life is The reason abortion is issue number one is through three simple reasons. Number one, like you just said, no right is more fundamental or foundational. Without life, you don't have anything. Every other right depends on life. There's two other simple reasons. Number one, no victim is more defenseless than the child in the womb. That child can't even pray, much less speak up or protest. And then the third reason, now those two things can never change. The third thing can change, but it hasn't changed, which is nothing takes more human life than abortion. Nothing. Certainly not climate change or immigration or anything else. Not that these things aren't, concerns for people. But the point is this. It's very dangerous to disconnect completely these issues from one another. I think of what Pope John Paul, now St. John Paul, wrote in a document that is now 25 years old called The Gospel of Life. Okay, many of our listeners would be familiar with this document. And if not, it's worth reading no matter what your denomination might be, or even if you're not a person of faith. Because the document says some very powerful things in it about this point that you're making now. What happens to a government, to a country, when it legalizes the killing of children? What the Pope says is he makes several assertions. Number one, he says, it may look as though this legalization came about through proper democratic channels. Maybe there was a vote. Maybe there was a decision issued by a legitimate court or whatever there might be. But, he says, it's not democracy anymore. It has betrayed the very principles of democracy, because the understanding is that in a democracy you have everybody protected. Everybody is equal. It's a common home. Everyone is safe. But when abortion has been legalized, the killing of children, now not everybody's safe. And the part of this group of people is now destroying another part. So now everything is on shifting sands. Everything becomes negotiable, even the most fundamental right. Then he uses a word to describe this, which is very strong language. He said the state becomes a tyrant state as soon as you do that. You take away protection from one group, you let the strong destroy the weak, it's a tyrant state. And then he said two other things. He said, this is the death of true freedom. Ironically, some will say, oh, well, this is freedom.
Yeah, this embodies true freedom.
Yeah.
Right?
He says it's the death of freedom. Because what are you doing to freedom when not everybody can even begin to have it? And then finally he says, when this happens, the disintegration of the state itself has begun. Now, I want to refer people to that document. Read it, study it. There's a lot of commentary on it. But here's how it answers the question that you bring up. Some people will say, well, I may agree with the Republicans on ending abortion, but really the Democrat Party has a better way to get there. Well, first of all, that's very debatable.
Yeah.
And a lot of people oversimplify, and, it even gets into the area of rash judgment when they say, like silly things like, Republicans are not for the poor. What in the world does that mean? You have candidates going around campaigning for the right to poverty.
Yeah.
There was no... But the thing that has to be understood here is the Democrat Party has become absolutely destructive and dangerous. These are now people who are saying what John Paul II said. They're advocating for a tyrant state.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can't. The other policies then don't matter. You can't be right on these other issues if you've taken away that fundamental right to life. You can't be right on these other issues.
Yeah, I know. I'm just like, I think of so many conversations that I've had over the years, and just leading up, and I know I'm going to be having leading into the election.
Yes.
Of why pro-lifers should remain engaged, why this is such a huge deal. I think too, I almost see it sometimes as like this almost misplaced compassion when I'm dealing with someone who is very upset with me about what they don't know me, but my perceived views on are all issues. Apparently, like I'm a poster girl from the Republican Party. I'm like, I am not. I might have worked at the RNC, but I did quit the RNC. I have disagreements, and but it's funny because I'm like, well, think about how can you say that I don't care about children in cages? Or I don't care about the migrant worker who's seeking immigration status. Or I don't care about a child who's stuck in a failing school in inner city Detroit simply because of you because I'm a registered
Yeah,
Republican.
did they even ask you
yeah.
your stance on those questions?
Yeah,
In other words, which shows they're not listening.
Yeah.
They're just reacting.
Yeah, it's so frustrating because I'm like, you and I may have different policy prescriptions for how to solve these societal ills. It doesn't mean that I think you're a bad person. I think you're sorely misguided and you have no idea what you're talking about with economics. You know, I may totally disagree with your position on how to solve an important crisis, but I'm not judging your character and saying you. And I think that's what the other side often does to pro-lifers, right?
They love to do that, and they also, there's another distinction that what you're saying right now brings up. There's a difference between a principle and a policy. Policy disagreements, are numerous, and they need to be, because nobody has magical, a crystal ball solutions to everything. And neither the Bible nor the Catechism nor any religious documents from any denominations pretend to have the answers on policy to every question that we deal with in elections. So good people who adhere to principle can disagree on policy. But there are certain times when the policy and the principle coincide. And that's what we're dealing with abortion. When we talk about whether or not the child should be killed or protected, the policy is the principle. You don't kill babies. That's a moral principle. That's a moral absolute. In other words, there's never a circumstance we could sit here for, if God gave us 1,000,000 years and sit here and try to think about a circumstance where it would be okay to abort a child. There is none, and there will never be. It's a moral absolute. So there's no difference in policy there when you talk about the basic protection of the child. It's not like, gee, let's figure out what this means. We protect the child or we kill the child.
It's very simple.
The policy is the principle. When it comes, for example, let's take immigration, for example. And what do you do on the border? Well, where is the principle there? Well, there are several principles. Yes, these are human beings. These are our brothers and sisters. Yes, they have a right to seek a better life. But there's other principles, too, like a nation has the right and duty to protect itself, and the duty to welcome someone in need is offset by the ability to meet that need. And there's a lot of principles now that come into play. And how do those principles translate into a policy? Well, for example, for Catholics, the Catechism of the Catholic Church does not have an immigration policy in it. It has certain principles. It says, yes, immigrants have rights. Yes, countries have rights. Yes, immigrants have duties. They have a duty to obey the laws of the country they want to go into. So you can't just barge your way in. You got to follow a legal process. And that, of course, is exactly what our president is saying. Come, but come legally. But the point is that policy and principle don't usually translate down to the same thing.
Abortion's so simple, right?
Right. It's not so simple. There's prudential judgments that have to be made. And guess whose job it is to make those prudential judgments? The people that are elected to public office. The legislators have to hammer out the legislative policy. The president has responsibilities with his team to hammer out what the executive policy is going to be. And we should not oversimplify these things. So going back to, like you say, the accusations people make or the rash judgments they will make against people like, you don't care about the people at the border. What in the world are you talking about? Not only that, but when people try to equate these issues, give me a break. I mean, show me the 3,000 people a day, innocent people, who are being beheaded and dismembered at the border legally, and then we can begin to talk about an equivalence between the abortion issue and the immigration issue. But in the absence of that, they're not even in the same universe in terms of importance.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think, do you think it's when someone says, and I was thinking about that Reverend and some of the stuff he's written about, now he's over on the pro-choice side of things of, well, we need to take care of the people who are here, and we need to vote
Who are here?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, the baby in the womb isn't here?
So it's almost like you might say that you're pro-life,
Yeah,
and you might
yeah.
say that you acknowledge that there's a human being inside of that mother's womb, and that human being has rights. But then when you say, well, we should put policies for people who are already like on Earth, breathing, it's almost like then it gets to, well, maybe you actually don't believe that the child in the womb is a child.
You know, I sometimes, Kristan, think that people who listen to us talk about the unborn children, sometimes it's like they think we mean unborn in the sense that, I mean, children who will be born 100 years from now are also unborn right now. And I think some people honestly confuse that, because then that's the only way that it makes sense to say, oh, the people who are already here. But the baby in the womb, even you find, like I'm sure as I do, even some of the most solidly pro-life people fall into a trap of language which reinforces this myth that these children aren't already here. And it's the way they talk about pregnancy.
Yes.
Hey, I'm, my friend is pregnant. She has 2 children and one on the way. And I say, well, on the way from where?
Mars.
When is the child going to arrive? If I say there's a package on the way, I don't have it yet. But a baby is not on the way when the baby's in the womb. The baby's here already. Or I'm going to be a mother. That's a great one. I'm going to be a mother.
Yeah.
When? If you're pregnant, if you get married, you can say I'm going to be a mother. But if you're pregnant, don't say I'm going to be a mother. You are a mother. And it's like, okay, either this baby is already here or he's not. And this is where this is fundamental. We got to start there.
That's why we stopped saying unborn for a long time.
Yeah,
We usually say preborn.
Preborn.
And I don't know. I've had a student one time kind of made a convincing argument. So I'm like, I kind of like it because unborn is also like a negative.
It is. It is a deprivation.
So well, I don't know if that helps.
Well, you know what I've been just saying recently? I've just been saying children. Children in the womb. They are children. Children, period. And so... because this is a terrible confusion. But somebody said you got to wonder: is it malice? Are they deliberately trying to deceive people, like you say about this reverend, or have they really forgotten, or did they not really ever acknowledge?
Did they not really? And that's actually what I usually think is that. You must not have really ever gotten it. Because once you know that a child in the womb is a child in the womb, and is a unique, whole, living human person, it's never existed before, will never exist again, it's really hard to backtrack on that.
It really is.
And there hasn't been any scientific developments in the past 25 years that would have changed that fact.
Exactly.
And so I think that's, I hear that all the time, on campuses, right? I'm pro-choice. I would never have an abortion. I believe abortion's wrong. I know abortion kills a baby, but I don't have the right to tell someone else not to have an abortion. I'm like, well, then you must not think abortion kills a baby,
No,
right?
that's right. Because would they ever talk that way about child abuse? I would
How
never
dare you
abuse
compare,
my child.
How dare you compare abortion to child abuse? That's totally different things.
Different things. Yeah,
that got screamed at me at campus recently.
Uh-huh.
I said, well, why is it different?
How is it different? Right.
That's totally different because the child's already here. Aha. So we're back to the same old argument again. You don't believe it's a child.
A lot of it is we are battling in this movement against the out of sight, out of mind reality. Although the baby is much less out of sight these days than ever before in our history, thanks to all the imaging techniques, the embryoscopy, the ultrasound, and so forth. But still, even with all that technology, even though the fact that so many people's first picture now in their photo album is when they were in the womb, even despite that, it's still an out of sight, out of mind challenge that we have.
I know.
It really is.
I've often thought, like, if you had an abortionist, if you can convince abortionists who's, some of these abortionists are very firm. I mean, they're very firm and resolute in their beliefs that they're dismembering a human being, but they don't really care, right? That human being doesn't have any rights.
They don't care.
So I'm like, wonder if they would ever convince an abortionist to say, why don't you just do your abortions live?
Yeah.
Just do them live. Go outside, put an ultrasound camera on the mom's belly.
That's right.
And just show the world what you do in that POC lab, that products of conception lab. Where you put all
Open it up.
Just do it on the sidewalk. Say, would you like to see what's in my Petri dish?
Well, you
that
know,
would that abortion facility wouldn't really survive. Past maybe like what?
This
2
really
days?
this really proves we're right, doesn't it? I sometimes make the comparison. I say to people, look, what if I stood out on the sidewalk? If I weren't dressed like this, and I didn't say anything, and I didn't hand out any flyers, and I didn't show any words on any sign, but I just held up a picture of an aborted baby on this public sidewalk. Here's my question: would people think that I was in favor of it or against it? I'm not saying anything. They don't know who I am. I'm just holding a picture of an aborted baby. Everyone's going to conclude I'm against it, and I'm protesting it. But why? Maybe I'm selling it. Hey, down the street here,
Hey, get this.
But they will conclude I'm against it, won't they? And that shows we're right. Because just when you see it, human nature, human conscience, we still have enough of it that it reacts against it. It revolts against it.
Feeling. I know it's very interesting because I always tell students in campus, I'm like, why do you feel queasy in your gut when we talk about abortion?
Yeah.
When I bring up the abortion instruments in my speeches on campuses, it's like, why do you look away? I'm not showing you an image. I'm just showing you tools of an abortionist. I'm showing you the appropriate size, the approximate size of a fetus that's being dismembered. Why do you feel uncomfortable with this?
Well, you know, Sister Helen Prejean, who has, over the years been a stellar opponent of the death penalty, and she writes in her book, Dead Man Walking, she says, if these executions were shown publicly, it would stop. We would ban the death penalty. Is that not exactly what we're saying here?
Yeah.
If we could just go ahead and watch the abortions. It's like, remember a few years ago there was that young woman who said, "Oh, I'm gonna film my abortion," and she put it out all on social media, and let's take a look. She filmed her abortion, and I looked at her and I saw her face.
Yeah.
And my response to that at the time was, you did no such thing. You didn't film your abortion. You want to film your abortion? Get a camera in there, like you were just saying, and show us what happens to that baby. Show us the baby being torn apart. Show us the arms and the legs and the hands. And, you don't have to listen to us. Just get the medical textbooks on how abortion is done.
Yep.
And she wasn't showing it. She wasn't filming her abortion. And this is where, again, people need to just come down to the reality of it. And is this what we really believe in? And is this what we want to vote for? Is this what we want to continue?
How do you handle, so my last question, how would you handle and how do you handle, I don't know about your family and someone, your loved one, a friend of yours who is just so upset about your support of a specific candidate, right? How can you dare vote for that person? Or there's a lot of other issues, and yes, Frank, I might be against abortion, in favor of pro-life policies, but there's a lot other issues that we need to care about that are also equally important too. And you just can't be narrow-minded and have one issue you vote for. Yeah. How do you start that conversation with that loved one, someone you want to keep a relationship?
Well, your family's the most difficult group to minister to, and sometimes if the person is of goodwill, and that's a key distinction to make. Sometimes they're just venting. Sometimes they just want an argument. But if they're interested in an honest conversation, it may be doable, but you may also have to say, listen, I'm going to refer you to my good friend over here who's got this website, or they've got this podcast, or they've got this information. Would you do me a big favor and just take a half hour and listen to them, or read this book, or read this article? Sometimes that's the best way, because then they can go read it in the quiet of their own home privately, and there's no tensions flaring or emotions, and then again, if they're really interested in asking you and hearing the answer to that question, then let them come back after they've read a little bit. I might send them an article, offer to send them an article or something. That's often the best way. Because people, when they're too close to us, it's just sometimes too hard to keep the conversation focused. Whereas with a stranger, or if it's just with an article, they'll be a little bit more calm and objective. But if they are interested in really having a dialogue at that point, let's just go right to the issue again of our president. Listen to him. He's been having these rallies all over the country, and one of the things we do at Priests for Life, we've got our main website for the election is ProLife Vote, ProLifeVote.com. And one of the things we do there is we urge people, watch the rallies from beginning to end. Because when he speaks, it becomes very clear why we support him. Listen, I don't want criminals released into my neighborhood. That's one of the reasons I support this president. I don't want all kinds of people flooding into our country that aren't supposed to be here and that are going to ruin our neighborhoods. The criminals we're talking about, the policies that he is advocating about. I want America to have good trade deals with other countries. I mean, that's a moral and religious value too. I want the other nations to pay their fair share when there's these economic obligations that we have towards one another. Why should we let America be cheated? And this goes back to what we were saying before. Some people are concerned about, the president's, I don't like his tweets. You know what? I would rather have a president whose tweets I don't like rather than whose judges I don't like or whose laws I don't like. I happen to not mind his tweets at all. I think he's genius in the way that he's speaking directly to the American people and controlling the conversation. But the point is, I was concerned about, the sexual innuendos that he said, years ago. Well, yeah, but how about the policies of Planned Parenthood that would be written into the law? You take a look at their sexual morality and what they teach. You want that upheld by courts for generations to come? Or do you want a president who's going to put judges on the courts who are going to draw some boundaries around this sexual perversion that groups like Planned Parenthood are promoting? Again, it's just, let's ask the right questions. Let's focus on the right things. I want our military to be strong. That's why I'm going to support him. I want our economy to continue to be strong. I want our veterans to be taken care of the right way. I mean, we can go down the list. People want to know why. There's a lot of reasons why. And there's so much progress, and there's so many accomplishments, and so many good things, and so many things that he's done that so many previous presidents have said they wanted to do.
That is true.
And couldn't pull it off. Something like the capital, the American embassy in the capital of Israel, which is Jerusalem. It was said before. How about the right to try? This is a fascinating thing.
This is very important.
That there are these experimental drugs, and the president tells the story. He got into office, and they were telling him about this, and it says, well, why can't we just let people who are dying anyway try these experimental drugs, even though they haven't gotten final approval? Oh, well, liability. Well, then let them sign a release. That they won't hold you legally responsible, but they want to try. I don't know. This is just, he's a man of common sense. He's a man that's getting things done. And when, like you say, a loved one or a friend is, all upset with me because, why are you supporting this man? A basic response is, maybe it's time for you to learn a little bit more about this man and his administration and his accomplishments.
Wow. This is why you're the co-chair of the Trump Pro-Life Advisory Council, and I'm just a member. Because my usual response is, I don't read his tweets, and you don't have to like him. You just have to be absolutely terrified of the Democrats. I mean, that's
the whole other side of the coin. That's right.
That's the thing. It's like you don't. I'm not asking you to ever want to hang out with Donald Trump or to like everything he's ever said or approve of everything he's done. I certainly don't. But I am absolutely 100% terrified of those who are running against him and what the promises that they have already made and their voting records in the U.S. I mean, they actually this week voted to say that babies who feel excruciating pain during abortions, those abortions should continue. That babies who are born accidentally during an abortion shouldn't have basic common health care administered to them, that they should literally be left to die. And that's supposed to be considered like the moderate or the pro-choice stance. That's extremism. It's that's barbaric. Out of touch with, 7% of Americans. I don't. I mean, it's high. It's in the 90s. Who would say? And it's so frustrating to me because I'm like, I actually have a hard time believing that some of these candidates actually believe in the policies they vote for.
Why would it be such a party line vote? I mean, there were only on what was it on the Born
Democrats.
Alive? There were two Democrats.
One of mine
came over
Casey from PA, Manchin from West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
They were the only two in both of the votes.
How could that be? That how could it be just so party line? You gotta believe that Now, they don't really believe this. They're trying to please the party.
And that actually then gives you another thing. You're trying to please the party. So you don't actually... I have a hard time believing you actually
what kind of
believe.
integrity
Yeah,
is
what
that?
kind of integrity
What kind
are you?
of-
Because
talk about character in a candidate.
You're voting for policies that I have a hard time believing that you actually support.
Yeah.
You're doing it because you're so terrified of Planned Parenthood, their dollars, that they're not going to give you an election, the party coming after you and stripping you of your committee assignments.
Right.
So you would rather just vote for something you don't actually support. And that's a huge integrity issue. How can you ever be president of the United States?
It's really selfish too, because they know full well those babies can't vote for them or vote against them. And that, that's a sad reality here that we're looking at. They're not going to get any flack.
It feels like that should
from
be like
those
a
babies.
T-shirt slogan or bumper sticker.
Yeah.
Like if all the aborted babies were voting.
Could vote.
Yeah.
And then the way I say it too is, listen, if a politician can't respect the life of a little baby, how's he supposed to respect yours?
Yeah. Well, on that note, I think you've given all of our listeners something to think about. I'm sure I'll be getting lots of email comments and questions I might be forwarding over to you.
We'll continue the dialogue.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We have a lot of conversations leading up into the election that we're going to have. And I think some people are really going to have to kind of soul search of how am I going to reconcile and how, these policies that I support or don't support. So I appreciate you all listening. Even if you disagree, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this entire conversation. I think it means a lot and says a lot about who you are if you disagree, but that you are willing to actually listen to another conversation, another point of view. So thank you for tuning in this week. Make sure you spread the word about Explicitly Pro-Life and tell all your friends to subscribe and to follow Father Frank. He's on all the social media,
yes.
Instagram, Twitter. You have your own podcast that
yes.
you do with Priest for Life. So you can check out Father Frank. He's always he always can give you like a sermon anytime you talk to him in like 5 minutes. It's like a Baptist sermon wrapped up in Catholic theology. So I have lots of notes over the years, even before I became a Catholic, listening to Father Frank's homilies /sermons. So thank you all. Bye.